twice a year, if it's more than £500. 31st of January and 31st of July are the payment dates that you make. If any of you have a husband that is also, or a wife that is also a language teacher, or an English teacher, is anybody husband and wives, or if your husband and wife did the same thing, potentially you could be a partnership and offer the same services if you were both supplying the same services, not just to LLE, but to whoever. And sometimes that's advantageous because you might both have a personal allowance. So sometimes people will work in partnership with their husbands and wives if they help in each other's business. So that's, if you're going to be a limited company, I would definitely take separate legal advice on that because the rules are quite different. So it wouldn't be suitable for tutoring normally.
If you have, I'm the sole tutor in the family,
yes.
But we also let rooms to local language school students.
Okay, yeah.
And I was wondering whether, if we became a partnership for that,
yes,
would it be sensible to incorporate the LLE business into that or to keep it separate?
I think you can, providing LLE has no problem contracting with a partnership, which they may or may not. I don't know why they would or why they wouldn't. Then no, there's no problem because a man and his wife can operate their tax affairs however they see fit. So if it's tax advantageous for you to form a partnership, I wouldn't form one with a partner who wasn't husband or wife, who was just passing through your life, because that could have disastrous effects. But if it's someone who's your husband or wife, you can work in partnership if you're working to the same thing, if you help each other in each other's business, then yes, you could be a partnership and then you share the profits.
But equally you could keep it separate.
Equally you could keep it separate. You could claim your accommodation for your students under the rental room use scheme because for the other language schools, because it's nothing to do with the provision of language tuition, whereas provision of language.
We do provide them.
Oh, you do that as well. So you can still do it a little bit more so because there isn't a service of self-employment. Because normally providing breakfast isn't sort of self-employed. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the records you keep depend on the type of business you have. It needs to be simple. There are lots of programs available to you. For LLE, I would say something like Excel is the simplest thing. Are you able to use it? Anyone can't use Excel? Yeah, but a sort of a manual equivalent of Excel is probably, you don't need to have online cloud-based expensive monthly commitments for a bookkeeping system. It can be really, really simple. I've got an example of what I think you should use. Basically, any of our clients, we give them an Excel formatted spreadsheet to use, and if they haven't got a computer or they don't like Excel, then we give them a manual copy and we tell them how to keep the records. If you've VAT registered, you need to take separate advice. So yeah, this is nice. This is actually true. This is how not to keep records. This is one bank we received on the 31st of January. He said, there are my accounts. That's not how to keep records. It was worse than that. There are about 5 banks like that. And that's his hand.
Although you do have that, because you have to keep all the bus tickets and all
Oh,
that.
absolutely. But I mean,
You've got to have them. That's what I'm done.
you have to be a bit more organised. But we do get records like that, but we also get records like this. Much nicer to keep nice, tidy records. Much easier. You can go on the revenue website. It's not the best place to go, but it does give you expenses if you're self-employed. They're not going to be very generous, obviously. They're going to tell you the absolute figures you can claim. They're not going to tell you the creative things that you might be able to claim. So theirs is going to be a little bit on the low side. The thing with the revenue, you can claim anything that's wholly and exclusively for business use. So if I buy a computer, and the reason I bought the computer was for my business, it's an allowable expense. If I bought a DVD player with a screen to show video DVDs to my students, then that would be an allowable expense, as long as I didn't already have it for family DVDs or we didn't watch it for movies and things like that. So if you go out and you buy equipment like that, or you buy resources or materials, or you buy a new desk for the office, just simply to do language tuition, then of course you can claim for it. So it's wholly and exclusively. There's no list. The revenue will give you examples. I'll give you examples. But if you were an artist and you were going to Brazil and painting tropical birds or something, yeah, all your trips to Brazil would be an allowable expense. But as English is a foreign language in this country, you can't really have holidays in Brazil as a business expense. So you have to use common sense, and you have to sort of say, well, what's the purpose?
I've just had the downstairs room completely refurbished for the benefit of the students, including a new bathroom, etc. How much of that would be considered a start-up cost? And
If it's capital, no, like as an improvement to your property, because obviously you're not. If you're putting shelves up in the student's bedroom and you're having extra plugs put up and you're having a blackout blind because the students can't sleep, or bedding, or you're having a new carpet because the last one upset beer and wine all over it, then those things would be an allowable expense. But if you're having a new conservatory built because you haven't got enough room, or you're having a loft extension, then you can't have any capital improvements to your house. They're not running expenses. So you can claim all the running expenses and you can claim all the additional expenses, but you wouldn't claim for a new bathroom.
okay.
Unless it was in a separate house that you know, like a buy-to-let house or something like that. But you wouldn't claim it for
So things like extra sockets and
yeah,
things like
so
that.
extra sockets, shelves, desk, carpet, curtains, blackout blinds. You know, if you had to have the carpets cleaned between students, or you know, there wasn't enough hanging space and you were buying a wardrobe that was just for this room for the student. If there's the revenue aren't going to come out in check, but at the same time, you have to be realistic. So if your income from language tuition was £10,000, £15,000 a year, you wouldn't possibly try to claim £25,000 worth of expenses. You would sort of go to that. So some people do, quite a lot of people do actually, but they don't get away with it. You know. So,
My question is that I don't have many students.
right.
I mean, the maximum number of weeks I've had in a year, I think, was probably about 9.
Right.
So the sorts of things that you're talking about,
Yes.
I think they might be like.
So what kind of things did you mean? Give me an example. So you're saying that because you've only got 9 weeks a year, you're saying you wouldn't be able to claim for new shelves?
Well, I don't think I'm saying that I wouldn't, but I'm just saying, would they come back and say, you can't have this? You know?
Sometimes they do, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a case of a pig farmer who had a pink Rolls Royce, and they came back, it wasn't one of our clients, and they said, you can't have a pink Rolls Royce. And he said, why not? Show me where it says I can't have a pink Rolls Royce. And they said, well, it's not necessary for your business to have a pink Rolls Royce because you're a pig farmer. What pig farmers need a pig? So that's the sort of logic they use. So if you claim shelves and you only have 1 student, you could have equally had 52 students. So there's nothing that says because you claim shelves you've got to have 52 students. You know, one a week for a year. It doesn't work like that. It's just, sometimes people will spend £10,000 starting up a business. They'll have all the advertising done and they'll have all their literature done, they'll have a website done, and then they don't get any customers. It doesn't mean they can't have those expenses still. So it's wholly and exclusively for business use. So if you bought a 62-inch plasma for your lounge, it's a different thing altogether. But if you bought a small, if the student has to have a television in their own bedroom and you bought a small £200 one for the wall, yeah, that's an allowable expense. If the business doesn't take off, or if you did it for 3 weeks and you didn't like it, it's still a business expense because your aim was to keep it in a student room. So as long as you change your mindset to understand that, doesn't help.
Sorry, just one more question. When you change over into the 6th of April into the next tax year,
Yes.
if you spent out on the start-up costs in the previous tax year,
Yes.
can you offset them against the next tax year?
Yeah, but you can make it only if you make a loss. So for example, if it depends on your total income for a year. If in the first year of trading you made a loss because you had no other income, so you spent £3,000 on startup expenses, but you had no income to offset against it, you would have technically made a loss. Now that loss can either be offset against your PAYE income, and you can get some tax back in that year, or it can be carried forward to the next year to be used against the same business. So you couldn't use it next year against a PAYE job, but you could use it next year against your teaching income. Does that make sense? So you can either relieve it against other income now, or carry it forward to reduce your profits next year. So you can use it one way or another. Yeah. So you will get tax relief on it. It doesn't matter that you don't get it in that particular
Okay,
year.
so if I spent out in January, February,
Yes.
March, I can offset it against the next.
Only if if your income was say £2,000 and you had £2,000 worth of expenses, then technically there's no profit, so you're not going to be carrying the expenses forward to next year. But if you had no income and £3,000 worth of expenses, and you had no income from any other source, you would carry that £3,000 loss to offset against the next year.
If you did have income from other sources.
If you had income from other sources, then you can offset it against that in the year to reduce your total tax, or it depends on your circumstances. If you told me the example afterwards, I could tell you. Yes, it comes in afterwards, that'll be fine. So that's not how to keep records, and that is how to keep records. And this is just a sort of a typical profit and loss account, because if you're self-employed, it is important that you get into the sort of the way that your tax return is going to be done. So you have to, I've just given examples. Normally we just look at 2 years, compare one to the other, because that's what the revenue do. Their computer is set, so if 1 year you've made 12,000 and you've had £7,500 worth of expenses, and the next year you've made 12,000 with £200,000 worth of expenses, they'll call you in for an inquiry, because their computer is set to default on very unusual things. So this is a sort of typical person earning 12,000 with the expenses that they've claimed in the year. They've only got £4,500 on which to pay tax. And in this example, 26,000, and I've split it between the sort of headings that you might find on the tax return. And these numbers down the side, we'll talk about them in more detail, what expenses are included in each of those sections. I'll talk about that in a minute. And so basically this one, this person's made £16,500. So this person's going to pay tax, this person might have to pay tax, depending on if their total income from all sources was another £6,000 from rental income from elsewhere, or investment income, or pension, or PAYE income, then they may have to pay tax, because you can only have £10,000 worth of total income in a year before you pay any personal tax. Some people, like you, I was speaking to you earlier, you stopped work partway through the year, you're probably due a tax refund. So sometimes if you have stopped a job in a year, then you may have paid too much tax on that job, so you may end up getting a tax refund, which you don't. So I'll go on to talk about those expenses. So basically these are the things that, in the same sort of headings, oh, you can't move these. I can read it on there. I've probably got it because I've got it in blue. So, right, the first column says educational. This column is educational. This column is premises. This column is administration. This column is motor and travel, professional, and sundry. So sorry you can't see the headings. I didn't realise that the colour would make it invisible. So if I turn to my page, it's easier to follow. So basically, there's no exhaustive list. So if you've got other things that you think, I thought of lots of things afterwards, for example, in premises, I've missed out a very obvious one. Anyone spot the obvious mistake in premises costs? What might you be able to claim as well as that?
Insurance, poll tax.
Mortgage?
No, definitely not mortgage. The revenue aren't going to buy your house.
Utilities.
Utilities. What do students do besides make a mess? You can cleaning. Cleaning's not on there. So, cleaning costs. It might be if you have a normal family life, you might not have a cleaner. You may feel if you're going to have students in, your standards may need to go up, and you may want a cleaner. So if on that basis you chose to have a cleaner because you thought it was necessary for your business, then you could claim for the cleaner, because you could demonstrate quite rightly to the revenue that you've never had a cleaner before, but now you're running the business from home, you have to clean the toilet and you have to clean the bathrooms more regularly than you ever did before. So a cleaner would then be an allowable expense. So that's the kind of logic that you have to apply. It's any additional costs from running a business from your home. So it wouldn't be things like council tax, which is set. So if you pay a certain amount of council tax,
So it would be the increase in insurance because
Yes.
of strangers staying in the house,
yes,
and the paying for the gas check
yes.
because of strangers
Because you
staying
wouldn't
in the
normally have a
house.
gas check in your own house. So if you're made to have a gas check because LLEs say you have to have a gas check, then the whole cost of a gas check would be an allowable expense. Because who would have a gas check on their own house? I don't. Does anybody have a gas check on their own house? Unless you're renting it to students. So yes.
It's the landlord certificate you're paying for, right?
Yes.
Not your desktop.
Yes. Yeah. So basically, any additional expense is an allowable expense.
And if the cleaner you employed was your wife, that's okay.
Yeah, you can pay your wife as long as she hasn't got any other income amounted to more than £10,000. So if her income was already £10,000, if you paid your wife, you'd either have to stop her tax and national insurance, or she would have to register as